So when I came up with the idea of starting a group for moms who are alcoholics and drug addicts, I started by marketing my group, and I promoted it on my website and on my blog, and I put flyers all over town, and I also was promoted by another website that has thousands and thousands of people who follow it. And I received a couple of phone calls, and after a few weeks I realized that women, moms especially, who are drug addicts and alcoholics, are pretty unlikely to come to me of their own accord and say, I need help. First of all, the nature of the illness of alcoholism is that it's an illness of denial. So a person's not going to seek help in any form or even admit they have a problem until they're so backed into a corner that there's no other option. Second of all, moms have an even tougher challenge because there's so much shame and fear. There's the shame factor where still society, when I talk about how I write articles about moms who are addicts and motherhood and addiction, people respond to me with shock. They say, mothers, really? This is really a problem with moms? It's really mind-blowing to me that people don't acknowledge that this is even a problem because it's so prevalent. And women have so much shame because of that, because there's this idea that if they were a good enough mom, they wouldn't be an addict or an alcoholic. And also there's fear. There's fear that they're going to get reported to child services. There's fear that their children are going to be taken away. There's fear of their reputation. So for a mom to even come forward and admit that she has a problem, it takes either an act of God or total desperation. So in my own interest in getting my group started and really trying to get some recovery out there that addresses the specific issues that affect moms who are addicts, I started going to treatment centers because I realized that that was where women were that were already in treatment, had already faced the fact that they had a problem, had to face the fact that their problem was serious enough to separate them from their children to go into treatment. So I started a group in a treatment center that works with men, women, people who've been court committed, and there were many moms in the group, and that's how I started my group. And I'm also going to be starting a group for dads as well. So moms who are addicts, the number one characteristic that they all have when they come to see me is that they're dripping in shame. There's the sense that if they were a good enough mother, and they loved their children enough, and if they were grateful and they loved their family, then they wouldn't need to drink and use drugs. And that's the biggest myth, and that's a myth that many people in their lives perpetuate. And moms who drink and use addictively face so much judgment over it because there is that sense that if they were really grateful for their family, they wouldn't need to turn to drugs and alcohol. And the truth is that addiction and alcoholism doesn't care about your children. It doesn't care about your career. It doesn't care how many things in your life you have to be grateful for. All that drugs and alcohol care about is getting the person high, drunk, alone, isolated, and ultimately dead. And if anything in that person's life was strong enough to shield them against the addiction, then they wouldn't be an addict. I mean, that's the very nature of the malady, is that it seeks to isolate the person completely. So what I first try to do when I work with these women is educate them that just because you're a drug addict and an alcoholic doesn't mean that you're a bad mom. It doesn't mean you don't love your children. I wrote an article about Diane Schuler, and the title of the article was Diane Schuler is Not a Bad Mom. And my whole point was that yes, she was responsible for getting behind the wheel that day. She was responsible for the horrific accident. However, the fact that she was a drug addict and an alcoholic didn't mean that she didn't love her children. Because one thing really has nothing to do with another. And, you know, I often talk about alcoholism the way I would talk about diabetes or cancer. You know, if someone has diabetes, or cancer, everyone feels sorry for the person. And, you know, the person still has a responsibility to treat their illness, to take their insulin, to get chemotherapy. With an alcoholic or an addict, there's just judgment and condemnation. And you know, it's not a matter of victimizing the alcoholic, because I do believe 100% wholeheartedly that alcoholics and addicts are responsible. And in any program of recovery, a key component is accepting responsibility for your behavior and making amends for behavior and repaying, society and the people that you've harmed. And there should be compassion, because no one, when they're a child, says, I want to be an alcoholic or a drug addict when I grow up. No one would choose a life like that for themselves. And at a certain point, the alcoholic and the drug addict loses the power of choice completely. This is a completely medically proven fact, that the physical impact, the psychological impact of drugs and alcohol, it makes it impossible for the person to make rational choices and decisions. And when Diane Schuler got in the car that day, when she was drunk as could be and stoned, she was not making a rational decision. She did have the power of choice to pick up the drugs and alcohol, but she wasn't acting from a place of free will anymore. One article that I recently wrote was called Calling for the End of the Cocktail Playdate. So there's this new thing, it's not that new actually, it's been happening for several years now, where new moms get together for a playdate with their young children, but it's really an excuse for the moms to get together over 5 bottles of wine and get drunk while pretending to be doing something for their children while their children play, and it's called a cocktail playdate. And many moms have come forward defending this, saying that it's totally fine for them to get together and have a drink while their children play, and that it's healthy and that it's normal and it's okay. And all I have to say to that is, well, I have several things to say to that. First of all, it's so easy as a society to respond with shock and horror when we see Diane Schuler get behind the wheel when she's drunk with her children in the car. And it's so easy to point our finger at this one poor, sick woman and not look at ourselves and say, how often do we get behind the wheel after having half a bottle of wine with our children in the car? And, how many times have we driven drunk, even if we don't think we're drunk, who knows what the law would deem if they were to take our blood alcohol at that moment. And I think that the whole Diane Schuler tragedy gives people an opportunity to take pause and look at themselves rather than just casting blame and shame on this woman. And so many moms I know, under the guise of the cocktail playdate, they rationalize their own drinking, their own behavior. The mom who pops the pill before she picks up her kid at camp, all of that. And not only are you putting your children at risk when you're because no matter how in control you feel, when you're drinking and using in any form, your response time is diminished. If there was an accident or an emergency, how would you get your child to the emergency room if you needed to, God forbid? And those are all factors you have to think about. But even more so, what you're teaching your children when they're playing and you're drinking wine is that's how you relax, unwind, connect, and socialize. And the truth is that, in my own personal and professional experience, those connections that happen when you're drunk and high, those aren't even real connections. It's an illusion of friendship. It's an illusion of connection. I'm not condemning all drinking. Of course I'm not. But there's a big difference between having a glass of wine with dinner and getting together with a group of women over several bottles of wine and calling it a playdate, and using the term playdate as an excuse for moms to get together and get sloshed. And that's really what it is. And what I think this is about is the sense that moms today, modern moms, are so isolated. And society is different than it was. Children used to be able to be in communities, run out, play. There was a much more communal sense to motherhood and parenting. And now there's this sense that we're all very isolated. The 4 walls are closing in on us. Moms feel alone. They feel confused. There's so many choices they have to make, and they don't know, and there's so much information to go through. And one way that moms try to combat isolation and loneliness is they get together with other moms and they drink. And I think that there can be other ways that moms can get together and really support each other and really model healthy forms of self-soothing for their children. And one of the things I hope to accomplish with my group is to give moms a healthy way of connecting with other women, to come up with forms of self-soothing and coping, and to learn that they're not alone, that every mom feels at times that they don't like their children, that every mom feels like, did I make a mistake by having kids? Every mom feels regret about those parts of herself that she had to give up in order to become a mother. And that's not unique, and it's not a reason to feel shame because you feel ambivalence about motherhood. You know, and I think the more we can connect and be honest and not just come forward with stories of what a perfect mom we are on the outside and present the persona of perfection in terms of all the competitiveness that goes on. You know, my child, I mean, it starts when your children are infants. My child sleeps through the night. My child is walking at age 9 months. My child this, my child that, and it goes all the way up. And there's this sense of competitiveness and this sense of trying to present this persona, and underneath it, most people feel ambivalent and feel scared and have questions, and there isn't really a safe space in our achievement-oriented culture for women to express that. And the more that we can really be human and be mothers, the more we can really express our fears and our concerns, the more we can really support each other and break out of our isolation, the more we're modeling for our children how to be in the world and be healthy. And to not have to turn to drugs, alcohol, gambling, eating disorders, any self-destructive behavior in order to try to fill that hole. But there are healthy ways for them to try to take care of themselves. You know, I just read an interesting article that I can't remember where, of course, and it talked about how young children learn about the #1 factor that determines whether a young child is going to be healthy socially and be able to form friendships is if their mom is able to do so. If they notice that their mom is able to have healthy friendships, talk on the phone, have camaraderie. And you know, the question that I pose to people is, do you think that when you get together with another mom and you're getting drunk with her, do you think that that's a healthy connection that's happening? I mean, I know it feels fun, I know it feels good, I know it feels probably very intimate and connected in the moment, but in reality, is that a real connection? Is there real intimacy happening? And the answer is no, I don't think so. I just don't. And it's not my experience, and so often I hear that these friends that you drink with, that people party with, aren't even real friends. You know, it's easy in the haze of drugs and alcohol to feel that connection, but are you really supporting each other in any way? What are you teaching your children? So there's this sense that many parents feel that they can drink or they can pop pills, and their young children will not be impacted, that they can shield their young children from this. And I just need to speak to that for a moment. It was interesting, in my son's preschool, and this was when he was 3, they had a little exercise on Mother's Day where they wrote a card for us. And we all came in on Mother's Day, or the day after Mother's Day, on Monday following, and the teachers read the cards that they wrote. And there were questions. How old is mommy? And it was very cute. They'd say, oh, 92. What is her favorite food? Salad and potatoes. And then, what is your mom's favorite drink? So, you know, it was just very interesting that these 3-year-olds, how many of them said wine, wine, wine. And I just noticed that, you know, and I thought, this 3-year-old child, you know, who's essentially in so many ways still a baby, is putting that together, that's what their moms drink. And so many of the moms that I've worked with and that I've heard from, you know, as alcoholics, they initially tell themselves, well, I'm not going to drink until my child goes to bed. You know, so they wait for 7:30 or 8 o'clock. And then, well, I'm not going to open that bottle of wine until 6. And then suddenly it becomes 5, and then it becomes 4. 4 seems to be the magic number. And they, you know, and it's like anything. They wait all day for that 4 o'clock to hit, and that's when they can pop their first pill or take their first glass of wine. And the child knows. The child observes that. I worked with a dad once who was a pothead and an alcoholic. And he said that one of the reasons he got clean and sober was because his 2-year-old came to him. His son had just turned 2. And he said, Daddy, sometimes you smell funny and you act funny. So his 2-year-old noticed. The youngest child notices. Children are so intuitive. They see the behavior shift. They see what you reach for. They see how you respond to stress. And they see that they have one daddy who acts one way, or one mommy who acts one way, and then once she has that magic pill or that drink, she acts a different way. And then what you're teaching your child in those moments is you're teaching them that that's the way that they should, that you self-soothe, and ultimately that's what they're going to learn. And you know, and then your children evolve into preteens and adolescents and teenagers, and so many parents that I've worked with as well, you know, respond with so much shock and confusion that their teenagers are turning to drugs and partying and sex and alcohol and tattoos and cutting and eating disorders. Well, when they've grown up in their whole life, they've seen mommy reach for that glass of wine at 4 o'clock, or mommy say, oh, I feel fat, or I can't have that cookie because it has too many calories. Why are they surprised when their daughter becomes anorexic or bulimic, or starts drinking, or starts acting out in all sorts of self-destructive ways? You are as a parent, you are your child's biggest teacher. And we have such a responsibility as parents with our young children, because we are teaching them how to move through the world, how to respond to stress, how we self-soothe, how we form friendships, how we connect. And it does have an impact on your children.